Hello everyone, I'm Audrey Tang, Taiwan State Minister. I'm very happy to be here virtually in the Workplace Pride Conference in Taipei, remotely through this video. When I first went online at the age of 12, I did not highlight my gender. I also understood at the time that the internet community appreciate values and contributions rather than labels and stereotypes. Therefore, I have never felt that I must be a boy or a girl, rather, why not both? Through my two experiences of puberty, I could now empathize with the feeling of both. When I say to puberty, for me the first time was at around the age of 14 or 15, when I clearly felt the physical changes. But the other time was when I was 24, 25 years old through hormonal replacement. This makes it easier for my mind to empathize with people because I've gone through some parts of your puberty, no matter the gender of you. So I wouldn't feel that half a population is different from me. I would feel that I'm just part of the Homo sapiens, which is a pretty large community. This is like how Judith Butler said about post-gender performativity. And this performativity is like an interface with the world. The key point is on how to leverage various interfaces to empathize with people who have different life experiences and intersectional perspectives. And this kind of subjective experiences is very helpful in my work too, because when other people mention subjective feelings, it may be similar to a certain subjective feeling of mine. In the memorable case earlier, there was a netizen with the name Wu who raised the proposal for single women to also obtain the right to artificial reproduction. I remember this case very clearly because when we were inviting stakeholders, there were some individuals with strong opposing views on other issues. There was, for example, people from the Family Guardian Coalition, but also a few from the Taiwan Alliance to promote civil partnership rights. These are individuals with rather opposing views on other subjects, but on this particular issue, the quality of the discussion was actually rather good because people could reach what we call overlapping consensus if this is about a specific matter and the stakeholder, a real stakeholder, have not yet been born. So what Taiwan has been striving to do is to allow people on various different ends of the spectrum and with markedly different positions to come to empathize with each other, to come to the table, to discuss and to collaborate. I'm often asked by people, as a transgender person, how does it feel to work in a relatively traditional environment like a government setting? My feeling is that I have not received any special treatment, any differential treatment. Business as usual is what I think is the best thing. And after years of efforts, Taiwan has become an increasingly friendly society for the identification of various genders as well as gender expressions. In May 2018, the legislature passed the so-called Hyperlink Act, the Enforcement Act in the third reading, and we became the first country in Asia to protect same-sex marriage of the individual-to-individual bylaws, but their families do not wed. This is what we call 结婚不结姻. It's a social innovation. And also, there was a proposal from our Young Youth Advisory Committee at the Executive Yuan, at the administration, for the Ministry of Education of setting up the gender-friendly restrooms into all the colleges and universities. And so more than half of the colleges and universities in Taiwan currently refer to the gender-friendly design manual of the Ministry of the Interior, including the office that you're seeing here in the Social Innovation Lab. We have the restrooms configured so that there's a universal access one, there's the gender-neutral one, and there's, of course, still women and men's restrooms. So on this basis, I think we're much more inclusive and diverse than ever before. And of course, the LGBTIQ community with the pride parades that has been held for more than 10 years. We actually had the first transgender parade in Taiwan also in 2019. In both law and also in daily practices, these gradual changes are made in the hope, of course, to make an environment of true inclusivity, which is how I feel in the Executive Yuan. We are not the same, but we are all different and equal. And finally, I would want to conclude with a short story. There was one day in April when a young boy called the hotline 1922 of the Central Epidemic Command Center, or the CECC, saying that he did not want to go to school because his classmates may laugh at him for wearing a pink medical mask. Because when you ration medical masks at the time, there was no choice of color. Well, the very next day, everyone in the CECC press conference wore pink medical masks, making sure that the kid becomes the most hip boy in his class. So that's breaking gender stereotypes, cultivating gender mainstreaming in education, and pulling together a diverse community. This has allowed many young people to live out the possibilities of their lives. So just like how I was inspired by the internet culture when I was 12 years old, this is happening in Taiwan day to day. So with this, I wish everyone here to be able to live in a way true to ourselves. And remember, biology should not determine our destiny. Thank you for listening. Live long and prosper.
Hello and welcome to the Workplace Pride Conference in Taiwan. The title of the conference is Trailblazing LGBTI Workplace Inclusion in Asia. And of course, this is a very important topic now because marriage equality in Taiwan, as the first country in Asia, is relevant both for the LGBT community as well as for the businesses operating in the country. Now, this is a hybrid event. We have quite a few people actually in Taiwan who have had a conference this morning, the first part of the conference, and now we're going to a live stream event for the rest of the participants. We're very grateful to our member EY in Taiwan to be hosting the event physically in Taipei, as well as our member ASML, who is also a host. We're also grateful to our partners, our non-governmental organization partners of Hotline Association and the Taiwan Equality Campaign, without whom we could not have put together this event. So first of all, a little bit about Workplace Pride. Workplace Pride has been working with the LGBTI community in workplace for almost 15 years now. And as you can see, we have quite a few members from many different sectors, from academia to consultancies, to heavy industries, and even the Dutch government itself is a member of Workplace Pride. And something that always impresses me, of course, is that we have so many different organizations for whom LGBTI workplace inclusion is a topic and it is a priority. And this is something you see in many places around the world. But you ask yourself, why is this a priority? Now, the reality is we spend a third of our working lives at work. The World Health Organization has said that up to 33% of our total working life is spent at work. However, if you cannot be yourself at work, if you cannot be truly comfortable, you're simply not as productive. Our own research and that of others has shown that 30% of productivity and creativity is actually lost if you cannot be yourself at work. And that certainly is the case for LGBTI people as well. Now, this case is even worse in countries where homosexuality is criminalized, or for cultural or political or legal reasons, you simply cannot truly be yourself. The map you see on the screen right now is from ILGA, that's the International Gay and Lesbian Association. It's very recent, only December of last year. And what you can see is that in many places around the world where it's dark blue or light blue, it's easier to be LGBT. It's certainly not always easy, but at least it's easier. However, in some places in the world, unfortunately many places in the world, not only is it difficult for cultural reasons, but sometimes even criminalized, or sometimes even with the death penalty, just to be LGBTI. And of course, for businesses or organizations working in these countries, it's a real difficult situation. On one hand, you have a global policy for LGBTI inclusion, where you want everyone to be themselves at work. On the other hand, you have many different legal situations or cultural situations where it's almost impossible to do that, just that. So what do? This is what Workplace Pride does, and this is what we're trying to look at also in this conference on Taiwan, to zoom in on the situation and what we can do now that Taiwan has become the first country in Asia to reach this milestone. So over the years, Workplace Pride has been doing quite a few activities on this topic. As you can see, we've been in many places around the world. in Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe. Last year, we did a conference in Singapore on this same topic, or similar topic at least. And again, we're very pleased to be doing the topic this year here in Taiwan. So without any further ado, I'd like to announce our first speaker. I'm very pleased to introduce Mr. Moriaki Kita. Moriaki is the Japan's Regional Chief Operating Officer at EY, and he has some very interesting things to tell from his own personal experience as well as from a business aspect. Moriaki.
大家好，我很高兴有机会会认识大家，也分享我的故事。Hello, my friends in Taiwan. I hope I did not butcher my Chinese. I'm Moriaki Takaki, COO of EY Japan, and thank you for inviting me today. I'm very honored to be with you and Workplace Pride Taiwan. First, I want to congratulate you for your efforts in Taiwan for equal marriage last year. As your friends from Taiwan, we were watching you very closely, and you really are a true shining star in all of Asia. It's really encouraging. There's an incredible top-down messaging in Taiwan for LGBT people nationally, and I was really honored to speak to your digital minister, Audrey Tan, recently, and I learned a lot from that conversation, especially the importance of taking care of minorities, which in turn does not only benefit minorities, but everyone in society. Other Asian countries are looking up to Taiwan in many ways. So how about my life personally? Let me share with you a little bit in the next slide. I knew I was gay when I was 16 years old, and I was close to committing suicide. At that time, there was the HIV and AIDS crisis going on, and gay people were being blamed for the epidemic. If you can imagine today, if LGBT plus people were being blamed for COVID-19, it's similar to that kind of analogy. There was no way to dream about life after school, no dream about having a career, and I felt that I would be lonely my entire life. But fortunately, things started to change when I came out to my school teacher, and that's why to this day, I believe how important it is to have allies in schools. Thank you for those teachers who are here today. In the university in the United States, I also became active to support inclusion of LGBT people and Asian students. I even chaired the LGBTI student group on campus. Then came my job interviews. Job security and stability and opportunity to advance in career is so important for young people. Then I've actually found a book called The Corporate Closet. In 1996, EY was the only accounting firm for somebody studying to become a certified public accountant. And EY was the only one with the anti-discrimination policy for LGBT plus people. But once I joined EY, I felt that I had to go back into the closet. LGBT plus was associated still with HIV, and there were people still being fired for being LGBT or coming out. But after working at EY for 9 years, I found out that our company was forming an LGBT plus employee group called Unity. And I also realized at that time that it's difficult to lead teams without being authentic to oneself. And so I decided to join, and luckily EY promoted me to partner in 2007. In 2014, fast forward another almost a decade, I married my partner. Looking back all these years, sometimes I want to go back on a time machine to go see myself when I was 16, to say it will be okay and don't worry. I want to continue speaking up, speaking with people like you in this room today, for this particular reason, to give hope to our younger generation. And the next slide shows at EY in 2005, we had only about 20 people in this employee group Unity. But last year in 2019, on the right side, you see we had more than 50 people. And these people were only 50 because they were selected in a lottery because we had hundreds of people who wanted to go. And we have thousands of LGBT openly and coming out at EY. So that's such a big difference. And in the next slide, in 2018, I was honored to support the launch of marriage equality and Taiwan Unity launch in Taipei. I marched in the parade, and there were so many people, including those from EY. And I was so grateful and incredibly proud to have our Taiwan managing partner, Andrew Fu, walking with us, supporting our young leader, Rath Wang. It's a wonderful example of how important leadership in organizations are. This is real example of top-down leadership. But so why do we do this as business? Because as business leaders, we know how important it is to have an inclusive culture to win in the market. But sometimes governments or nations don't know, including some general population. They don't understand why it's really important. So businesses can actually become a bridge between the commercial sector, the government sector, and the general public. So what we do in EY, I want to describe on this next page. Just in Asia Pacific, we have chapters in these geographies, including Taiwan. In one country, an example in Australia, we have multiple chapters. These networks are important because our younger generation of business leaders need to be recognized for what they do. And our younger generation can actually teach us older generations how to be honest, how to be authentic, as Rath has taught me to encourage and to the importance of courage to lead through vulnerability. And then the next page shows how important it is for these local chapters. Because first, in a recent study of millennials in the United States, LGBT plus people and gender non-conforming people can account for over 30% of the population. However, in the US, more than 30% of people go back into the closet when they join companies. In Asia, this is worse. You can see in the slide that in Hong Kong, over 70% of people go back in the closet, in mainland China, 94%, in India, 82%. So in the next slide, just a few things on what are the costs. Companies can have reputational damage. It can be cause for discrimination or harassment. There's employee turnover issue and lack of loyalty to the company. It also means lower employee engagement and diverse talent. High value talent may not want to join companies. And what are the benefits? We already know from many studies that productivities can increase by 18 to 38%. That means you can actually keep the current number of employees and almost work as if there is 18 to 38% more working population. There's also increased engagement and loyalty. And 80% of non-LGBT plus people think it's important to have a non-discriminatory culture. And just like women-led companies, companies with non-discrimination policy and culture have higher innovation and higher equity price. So at EY on the next page, we also have studied that LGBT plus people have spending power of over $5 trillion US. These are your clients, your customers. LGBT plus people, their friends and family will switch brands if other brands are LGBT plus friendly. Our chairman, Carmine DeCibio, also says to all of the other C-suites around the world that it's more important than ever. And that's why, even as the only openly gay C-suite in Japan, I'm raising my voice for Japan and rest of Asian business leaders. And in the next page, I want to just quickly share that EY has had a joint effort with a university called NYU, New York University in the United States, on how multinational organizations can increase maturity on LGBT plus rights. This expands on the report that we also put out called Out in the World, Securing LGBT plus rights in the Global Marketplace back in 2016. And this study looks at EY, Microsoft, and Dow. If you're interested, please come and reach out to EY. Company needs to understand the risks and legal, social, and company environment differences, but don't use them as excuses to do nothing. And people often don't know about LGBT plus inclusion efforts, and it's really important to recognize those people who are active. And lastly, companies did not have policies to support mentoring or sponsoring LGBT plus people, among other things. And so at EY, on next page, we think that it's really important to think about communication, education, belonging, and market presence, all three areas. In terms of communication example, I'll just quickly go through examples. For just like Andrew Fu was in Taiwan, it's really important to have top-down statement and important for the multinational companies to have global policy on anti-discrimination and not just local offices. We need to help them connect, people connect with each other, especially LGBT people who are out. And in the second one, belonging. This is to create a sense of belonging between LGBT people. And this is by creating LGBT-friendly HR policies, identifying and displaying allies who are active, and encouraging activities that groups like Unity at EY, the LGBT resource group, does, and let allies and LGBT people come together. And then lastly, on market presence, sometimes it's really difficult to do something alone by your company. So it's really important to connect with other companies that are in the same space or industry. And then it's important to team up with not-for-profit organization or non-governmental organizations. And on next page, here were actually our FY21 plan. So if you quickly look through it, we kind of follow what we had in the previous page, but HR policy, making it even more detailed, giving mobility assignments across borders for LGBT people to experience different career paths, and recognition succession planning to ensure next generation of LGBT people are trained and mentored properly. I'll just share one quick story. In 2016, I bought a car when I moved to Japan. And of course, I bought car insurance. But in 2016, the insurance company told me my husband cannot be covered as my husband because Japan does not recognize same-sex marriage. So he was covered just like a third person adult. And this August came the 4th anniversary, so I called the insurance company. And I decided to call up the insurance company to see if something different could be done. So I called and asked if my husband could be covered by auto insurance as a spouse. And as I expected, they said, well, we're not sure, but let us check. And after 24 hours, they called and they said, I'm afraid, Mr. Kita, but they said you have to sign 3 additional forms. But if you would, we can cover your husband same as if he was your wife. And I actually cried for the first time, not because I was able to save money for him becoming covered as a husband, but because I suddenly felt that a third party, an insurance company, recognized me and my partner as a husband and husband for the first time. And this is a new recognition that in Japan, only me and my partner, my husband, felt when we were at home alone. But now this third party company finally acknowledged us. And that was a really moving experience. This is what business can do and give power to all of our people. Please remember, you're giving hope. What you're doing is bringing recognition to those who we feel, who are feeling that they're not part of society. And I hope that you join me so that this type of dream can come true to many people in Taiwan and also across all of Asia Pacific and rest of the world. So that that same 16-year-old boy or girl or a person in our society can have hope for the future. Thank you for your time today. And thank you for Workplace Pride again for your invitation. Take care. Bye-bye.
Now move over to one of our keynotes for today, actually live keynote here in the office in Amsterdam. So I'm very, very pleased to introduce Taiwan representative for the Netherlands, Sensian Chen. And I'm sure she's going to have a very fascinating perspective for us. So, Representative.
Hi, thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone in Taipei. And thank you very much for having me. I'm a proud Taiwanese today because I know that it is no coincidence that Workplace Pride has chosen Taiwan to host this conference. Indeed, if we are going to talk about trailblazing LGBTI workplace inclusion in Asia, what better place is there than Taiwan, the first country in Asia to legalize same-sex marriage? And just like most of you here today, I was elected when the Legislative Yuan in Taipei passed the Act for Implementation of Judicial Yuan Interpretation number 748 on May 17 last year, making same-sex marriage a reality in Taiwan. This historic moment meant a great deal to me for both personal and professional reasons. Personally speaking, no, I'm not gay, but when growing up, I had many gay friends, and a lot of my favorite Taiwanese writers are gay. So I was naturally extremely pleased to share their pride and to see that life could be easier for them in the future. And in terms of work, being a representative to the Netherlands, the first country in the world to legalize same-sex marriage, I was very glad that there's even more, in common between our two countries. In fact, in March 2019, only 3 months after I arrived in The Hague, at the Taiwan Cinema Night in Amsterdam Cinema Asia Film Festival, when delivering my opening speech, I mentioned that Taiwan was likely to be the first country in Asia to legalize same-sex marriage very soon. I was interrupted by the applause and cheers from the audience, and it was very touching to see how our shared value bring us closer together. And neither is it a coincidence that Taiwan is the first country in Asia to legalize same-sex marriage. If we are ready to embrace diversity and respect for human rights, it's because Taiwan is a solid democracy in which non-governmental organizations are able to flourish and where the government is determined to promote progressive values. We all know the road to equality, to gender equality and same-sex marriage has been rough and thorny. And if today we're able to reap with songs of joy, it's because a lot of people half sown in tears. Taiwan's gay rights movement began in 1986 when the iconic activist Mr. Qi Jiawei held a press conference in a McDonald's in Taipei, calling for gay rights and combating the AIDS. It was 1 year before the martial law was lifted, in a time in which Taiwan was politically still an authoritarian state and socially very conservative. So you can imagine how much Qi Jiawei has suffered for coming out of the closet and making his move. Unfortunately, Mr. Qi Jiawei did not suffer for nothing. In parallel with the political and social movement in the late 80s, the fire of gay movements was ignited. Study groups was popping up in the campuses of the universities in the 90s. And relevant NGOs were formed to help out the gay community in Taiwan. And at the same time, Taiwanese literature and movies also helped expose the predicament of the gay community and raise awareness of the general public. In 2003, the first Taiwan Gay Pride was held in Taipei. The same year, the Executive Yuan proposed a legislation granting marriages to same-sex couples and was rejected by the Legislative Yuan. And only a decade later, some 23 lawmakers of Democratic Progressive Party, DPP, introduced a petition-initiated bill to revise the civil code to allow same-sex marriage, but it did not garner enough support. In May 2017, 1 year after President Tsai Ing-wen took office, the Constitutional Court, at the request of Mr. Qi Jiawei, issued a ruling that the ban on same-sex marriage in Taiwan's Civil Code was in violation of the Constitution and requested that the Legislative Yuan amend existing laws or create new laws within 2 years. That ruling was a major breakthrough for the LGBTI movement, but there were many challenges ahead. The referendum held in 2018 and the polls show that a number of Taiwanese people disapproved the same-sex marriage, and the legislators were therefore under tremendous pressure when it came down to voting for the right but somehow unpopular cause. Thanks to the unwavering commitment of the ruling party, the DPP lawmakers were united and adhered to the policy. We all know the happy ending, but that doesn't mean that the prince and the prince or the princess and the princess will live happily ever after. Even during last phases of the legislation in Taiwan, the LGBTI community faced tremendous pressure, sometimes even hostility from the opposing groups. From my own observation, in Taiwan, the divergence of views on LGBTI issues is in large part due to generation gap. And with a few minority, it was for religious reasons. If we want to make sure that our gay friends can really enjoy a friendly, non-discriminatory environment, the public and the private sectors must work together to raise the awareness of the general public by way of dialogue, education, and communication. Taiwan's government has been promoting gender equality through laws and institutions. The LGBTI rights are protected by the Gender Equality Education Act and the Act of Gender Equality in Employment, both meant to eliminate gender discrimination and mutual respect for gender diversity. Meanwhile, in the Executive Yuan, a special committee was established to bring gender perspectives into the government's policy making, supervise their implementations, and strengthen the partnership between the government and private sector in their work on gender issues. And having worked 24 years for the Foreign Ministry myself, I'm actually a witness of the top-down efforts by the government and the transformation in the administration. In fact, when I took the exam to become a diplomat in the mid-90s, the places for women were still very restricted, roughly on a 6-to-1 ratio with men, based on the assumption that women are not fit to work abroad. However, as time went by, the restrictions were lifted, and since the 2000s, we are asked to constantly review if the gender-related policies are being well implemented in our daily operations. I wouldn't go so far as to say that all of us in all the ministries appreciate or enjoy the extra paperwork, but there is no doubt that it had helped raise gender awareness among government employees and advance this cause in Taiwanese society as a whole. At the international level, Taiwan has been working with the EU since 2019 on the 3-year program for gender equality cooperation and training, in which Taiwan provides a platform connecting the EU with the countries in Asia-Pacific region in order to share relevant experiences and policies. That being said, we all know that in order to make real changes, the NGOs are indispensable. The NGOs has played a major role in promoting LGBTI rights all the way over the past 3 decades. And they are still the ones coming up with ideas, visions, and actions for further improvement. Today's conference is a shining example of it. Here, I would like to thank the Workplace Pride for their efforts in bringing the governments, the NGOs, and the business community together. I'm sure that through the previous sessions in Taipei, there have been robust and meaningful discussions on how to create a working environment in which everyone can be himself and thrive professionally. At the same time, these discussions are all the more crucial in this very challenging times and in today's even more polarized world. Because even before the pandemic, the rise of autocracy and anti-liberalism has caused concerns around the world. According to a recent survey conducted by Freedom House, the quality of democracy and respect for human rights have deteriorated since the outbreak of COVID-19 in as many as 80 countries. At the same time, the influence of propagation in social media also bring in the echo chamber effect, making it all the more difficult to get ideas across and to increase mutual understanding. Therefore, while it is very inspiring to see how Taiwan was able to transform itself from an authoritarian state into an open and diverse society within only a time span of 30 years, we can't be painfully reminded that the history of humankind is not always linear. And only if we fight together can we achieve our common goals. In conclusion, I want to stress that Taiwan has come a long way to where it stands today, a beacon of democracy and a force for good in the world. And the legalization of same-sex marriage highlighted our political determination to further consolidate the progressive values in our society. And more importantly, it is a testimony that Chinese civilization is completely susceptible to universal values. 20 years ago, the Netherlands legalized same-sex marriage and leading the world towards diversity and inclusion. I'm happy that Taiwan is catching up and wish that we will continue working hand in hand into the future where everyone is free to live and free to love. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Representative Chen. I think it's true. Taiwan is really a shining example in Asia, although it's still a tough road ahead, isn't it? And I'm glad you said at the very end as well that the Netherlands has also gone through this process, or at least 20 years ago when we did have marriage equality in this country, the corporate world was not yet ready. Right. It was still new. And I think this is kind of what we're seeing right now in Taiwan, that the corporate world can and actually should support marriage equality in the country. Again, we're very happy to have multinationals like EY and ASML to support this. But I think we could also call upon Taiwanese companies to do the same thing. There's so much.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, exactly. There's so much goodwill to be created, and I'm sure we can do it. So thank you very much again for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Now we're going to take a 15-minute break for Taiwan, and because they've been going since earlier this morning, and also for us here in Amsterdam. So those who are online on the webinar, you'll see a holding screen, but please do come back in 15 minutes. And we're going to have a panel with experts from different organizations. So look forward to seeing you in about 15 minutes. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. And hello again in Taiwan. Jennifer, can you wave? Good. We're online. Thank goodness. All right. So now I hope you all had a good break, both worldwide, wherever you are, and in Taiwan, of course. So now we're going to move into our panel session. And this panel session is entitled, Why Do We Need D&I in the Workplace and How Do We Achieve It? So we have three very distinguished speakers today. I can see Peter already. Let me introduce them one by one and ask them to each say a word or two about themselves and their organizations. I think we have one more coming up. There they all are. Hi, everyone. Great. Peter, can you hear us? Great. Well, we'll get him going. All right, Catherine, I'm going to ask you to start first, please. You're calling in from London. Catherine Dovey. Just a moment, Catherine. Can't hear you. I think we're going to switch to Tony.
Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you, Tony. Go ahead, and we'll get Catherine back on.
Terrific. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to join you virtually today. I do hope that all of you and your families are safe and healthy during this challenging time. My name is Tony Tenicella. I run IBM's Marketplace Diversity Organization, which focuses on advising multinational corporations, local enterprises on how to optimize their internal D&I experience to strengthen customer relationships and also help identify new business opportunities. My team also manages IBM's LGBT commercial strategy globally. So we've had the pleasure of collaborating with Workplace Pride, Open for Business, Community Business, numerous LGBT nonprofit organizations globally to advance LGBT plus inclusion. I also have spent a considerable amount of time in Asia and have visited Taipei many, many times. So I'm very sad that I'm not able to be there in person, but I'm looking forward to this discussion.
That's great, Tony. Of course, we worked with IBM last year. It was just last year in Singapore for a conference there. It was a really groundbreaking event there as well. So looking forward to the discussion today, Tony. So Catherine, we have you back on now. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm hoping
we can hear you as well.
Brilliant. Well, there we go. Everything functioning. Lovely. Well, thanks so much, David, and hello to everyone in Taiwan and on the panel and listening today. So my name is Catherine Dovey. I'm the Executive Director of an organization called Open for Business, which is a coalition of 34 global companies. And our tagline is really business action for LGBT plus inclusive societies. And it's a real pleasure to be with you all. I wish as well that I could be in Taiwan. I visited Taiwan with my wife a couple of years ago and loved it very much. So I'm definitely there in spirit. And really happy to be connected here as well, because just last year we worked on an important economic brief pushing for marriage equality in Taiwan with local partners and with Freedom to Marry Global, which I'll speak about a little bit more later. But thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Open for Business is such a wonderful organization. They really do very good in-depth research when it comes to LGBTI inclusion around the world from an economic perspective. So watch that space. It's very good. All right. So Peter, let me introduce you now from Community Business. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm also very sorry I can't be in Taipei for this. I lived and worked in Hong Kong for 23 years. So I visited Taipei 24 years ago, and so I've seen the massive amount of change there, and I commend Taiwan on its action towards LGBT plus inclusion. I joined Community Business as CEO at the beginning of March. I moved back to Europe, and I moved back to Hong Kong for this role. So coming back to Hong Kong at this particular time is very interesting, but no more important time to be working with minority groups than now. My entire 6 or 8 months of community business has been done via Zoom. I've met 50 odd clients this way, and I met Workplace Pride for the first time when I was in quarantine, coming back to Hong Kong. Tony, of course, I've known Tony for a long, long time because he was one of the original sponsors of community businesses. Hi, Tony. One of community businesses' earlier pieces of work on LGBT plus inclusion and why it's good for business. Catherine, I know your organisation very well. When I was at Chartered, we were pleased to be a member of the business, and so I commend you on the work that you're doing. For those of you who don't know community business, we're a Hong Kong-based non-profit. We work on a broad spectrum of responsible business practices, including diversity and inclusion, which has become an increasingly bigger part of our work over the years. We are known for our LGBT plus inclusion work, particularly our work on indexes, and we work with a broad base of other non-profits to try and elevate their work and their voices and to collaborate. So I look to collaborate with other organizations and not compete. And we work across Asia. We're a research-based organization. We publish research, which then informs our consultancy and training, but we also do lobbying work. We're part of Hong Kong Marriage Equality. And we have offices in India, in the UK, in Hong Kong, and then I have full-time consultants in Canada, in Australia, and someone working for me part-time in Singapore.
Wow, the entire Pacific. Fantastic. quite widespread. So thank you very much, Peter. A really very distinguished panel. So let me just jump right into it. A question I'm going to ask actually all of you separately. So diverse and inclusive workplaces are seen more and more as a truly critical business element for success for employers around the globe. Can you each give us your thoughts about this and how you see it translated into the markets that you're active? So Tony, let's start off with you. How do you see this?
Sure. Well, as some of you probably know in the audience, IBM has been considered a long time global leader in diversity and inclusion, as well as LGBT plus inclusion. So we've been around the block. We've been able to explore and innovate in the way that we develop and implement D&I programs globally. We were actually one of the very first companies in the world to adopt an equal opportunity policy lever back in the 50s. So it's something that makes me very proud as an IBMer, one of the reasons that I joined 25 years ago at IBM. But one of the most important lessons learned for IBMers globally regarding LGBT plus inclusion and D&I is that we need to continually understand, value, and harness the power of diversity as a business imperative. Because very simply put, differences lead to a diversity of ideas and perspectives, which sparks innovation that creates success. And the people who represent our company reflect not only our own employees, but also our clients, our business partners, prospective top talent that we want to attract in our dynamic workplace. So it's precisely our diversity of voices and the composition that helps us to appreciate and promote a culture of respect, inclusion, and belonging. So I like to say that for diversity to really make a difference in any workplace, it has to become a way of being, not merely a policy or practice. Something else that I want to throw into the equation here, into the conversation, is that, and this is something I know that Catherine and Peter, I know that both of your organizations have been also tackling this, is that the global viewpoint on diversity and inclusion has evolved over the years, from solely focused on constituencies, ethnicities, compliance, to a much more inclusive intersectional approach, which is really encompassing all aspects of an individual's background, experiences, and identity. Why is that important for us here in Taiwan? The reason that's important is because there's more focus on empathy and the way that inclusive leadership helps to create a culture of respect and inclusion. Harvard Business Review just recently released a study, just early this year actually, released a study on how inclusive leaders are effective in helping employees feel respected, valued, and inspired. So they identified 6 specific characteristics that really help to define inclusive leadership. And what we're learning at IBM is that empathy is a real critical element of workplace culture. And so this in particular, I think, is very helpful in the Asia Pacific region, because the more that we focus on promoting and developing inclusive leadership skills and competencies, I think the ability for us to address the LGBT plus community in markets where there's a high level of cultural sensitivity toward the LGBT community, I think it really helps us to develop and promote a culture of inclusion. So I think that's really the foundational element of what's happening in this evolution of D&I.
That's great, Tony. I really particularly like the whole focus on empathy. So, Catherine, how do you see that? I mean, with the same question about the business value for organizations, and with the research that Open for Business does, could you build in empathy to that?
It's a great question. And I mean, I would agree with everything that Tony just said, of course, and what you're saying as well, David. I think time and time again, we're finding so much evidence, as we know, that more diverse and inclusive workplaces are better for business, better for employees, better for everyone, right? But the tricky question is, why is this not happening everywhere then? If we know the benefits are so clear, why are we not moving into that world? Touching on empathy and the idea of being able to measure both diversity and inclusion, belonging, empathy is where you really start to see a difference. And that's not easy to do. I mean, if we start with diversity just today as an example, like diversity in Taipei looks very different to diversity in Mumbai or diversity in Sao Paulo or London. Context is everything, history is everything, right? And as a business leader, you always have to ask yourself the question, who is missing from the table? And who is the most marginalized in this society? In Europe, broadly speaking, the most marginalized population are Roma. And of course you can be Roma and gay, right? The tapestry of identities is what makes us human and what makes us beautiful. But it's not always easy to translate that into a global business context, into a measurable context. So I always want to know, how are you measuring diversity? How do you know you're doing a good job, right? And in the UK recently, we saw some great new targets that came out on race issues, race diversity and ethnic diversity at board level. They were just announced earlier this year. The targets on LGBT inclusion will look different. I mean, Workplace Pride has done a fantastic job of translating what these indicators are like. On the other hand, you know, there's a huge movement going on out there on business and human rights, right? So plenty of companies now are asking themselves the question, what does due diligence on human rights look like? And then what happens if you put an LGBT lens on that question? Not easy to do, it's a tough ask, but it's a necessary one because it helps to focus the mind and alert the company to where priority action needs to happen. And for us, just finally at Open for Business, I mean, we operate in plenty of different countries, but we've honed in our efforts more recently on 4 regions of the world: Caribbean, East Africa, Eastern Europe, and ASEAN. And to take the example of Poland, right? We all know LGBT-free zones in Poland has been a horrific thing for everyone to go through, whether they're LGBT or not. So there you're asking companies, you know, what are you doing? Because your LGBT plus employees are at risk presently, potentially when going to work or when at work. So we'd always advocate, you know, listen to your LGBT plus staff, listen to your civil society people. And that's how we can make sure that D&I can live up to its name, I think.
And it's so important that Taiwan now begins to build in that sense of working with the LGBT community at this relatively early stage. So,
exactly.
So Peter, how would you see it from your perspective in Hong Kong with a much more Asian lens on this whole aspect of empathy and you know, the human rights side of business? What's your thoughts on that?
I think I'll start by calling out the elephant in the room, which in this case is probably me, the white guy running a non-profit in Asia that tries to put an Asian lens on things. But, you know, there's not a single in the world that hasn't looked at their self and their own biases from a Black Lives Matter perspective this year. And so, you know, I think you lead with your experience and cognizant of what your voice can do in terms of using it for good. You know, when we first started looking at this topic, I think it was fair to say that it was seen as a Western concept, and in some instances not really relevant locally. And many companies were struggling to encourage their middle management and local stakeholders. And of course, it's somewhat true that many aspects of D&I require an approach and set of behaviours that are sometimes at odds with an Asian culture. And so when we first started looking at this, we looked at a piece of work called Examining D&I from an Asian perspective, and I think that's as relevant today as it was then. And so through that research, we sought to dig a little deeper and really unpick this and look at the local dynamics and inclusion issues on a market-by-market basis. And that we're seeing the same thing today with the ripple effects of Black Lives Matter. And it's not that they don't matter, it's they matter differently in different markets because there's a different level of indigenous populations and they're ethnically diverse and there's a whole bunch of cultural things that sit around that. But as much now with that topic, and I see that as an incredible catalyst for change, in the same way as the This Is Me movement helped people talk about things they couldn't before. It's allowed people to give voice to this issue, and it's an important issue. And so we found within Asia that although a different approach and language might be needed, the need for inclusion and belonging was no different. And the negative impact of being excluded or discriminated against is felt the same across cultures. And I think that's very important. But I think we really run the risk of causing more harm than we do doing good if we think it's one flavour fits all, because it certainly isn't. And the challenges here in Hong Kong are different to the challenges in Singapore, are different to the challenges in India, are no doubt different from the challenges in Taiwan and China. And I think we need to respect that, pay a lot of respect to the local activists on the ground doing work and try and empower them through our collaboration.
Yeah, okay. And actually,
one thing I would just add that there is a surge of empathy because of COVID-19, and I think we should ride that wave because everybody's a little more intentful as to how they start these calls by saying, hey, how are you? How are you traveling? How are you feeling today? And just our checking in with our teams and our people, that in itself is a change in how we've all behaved in the past.
And it's going to continue to change, isn't it? I mean, I think everybody in the entire world is a little bit unsure where things are going right now, not just from a business standpoint or a LGBT standpoint, but of course a political standpoint as well. So it's a bit of a tense time, but we can still make progress. And so, Catherine, actually, I wanted to zoom in a little bit more on Open for Business's report on Taiwan. Since this is about Taiwan, of course. Can you give us a little bit of the insights from what you've learned from that study?
Yeah, of course. And I can't take any credit whatsoever for this report because I only joined Open for Business 3 months ago.
We'll give you credit anyway.
That's very kind. But many of you will probably know my former colleague, Drew Keller, who led this work. And 5 of our coalition partners, actually, that was Deutsche Bank, EY, Google, MasterCard, and Microsoft, along with 10 Taiwanese companies, signed what we produced, which was effectively an economic brief to make the economic case for marriage equality in Taiwan. And the report, I mean, it covers the economic data that Open for Business is always drawing upon, which at the global level demonstrates that LGBT+ inclusion is very closely correlated to a country's economic development, right? Looking at GDP over decades. And on the other hand, that LGBT+ inclusive countries are more competitive. Net approval of same-sex relationships is a clear predictor of competitiveness. So already 2 great arguments to go for marriage equality. But then we dug a little bit deeper, I say we, my colleagues, into what was going on in Taiwan. And we found that there were 3 kind of main areas where marriage equality would help. And I hope that all of these come true now that marriage equality is passed. But the first is to support this shift to high-value industries in Taiwan. The second is to help the country attract global talent. And the third is to build stronger business performance in the country. So the first one on the high-value industries, here we're really looking at the development of the Asia Silicon Valley and the need for an open innovation ecosystem, which goes along with this culture of openness and inclusion, including LGBT+ inclusion. And our studies have consistently shown that LGBT+ inclusive cities have higher levels of entrepreneurialism and high-tech entrepreneurialism at that. In addition, LGBT+ inclusion or marriage equality enables Taiwanese businesses to connect and operate in global markets because more and more companies these days are building LGBT inclusion into their supplier codes and ensuring that there's no discrimination across the supply chain. The second issue is around talent. So as we know, attracting talent to Taiwan and many countries now is critical given the aging population. And you know what's interesting and what we found in this report is that although many companies today will offer joint partner benefits such as life insurance, medical and retirement benefits, even if marriage equality isn't in place, it's still expensive for them to do so, right? So one study found that unequal marriage laws across the United States in 2004 were costing companies $1.1 billion US. So we showed that having marriage equality in Taiwan makes the country an attractive place to do business. And then the third area we looked at, strong business performance, and this has already been touched on by speakers here and speakers earlier today. But we know, for instance, in Hong Kong, there's a study that demonstrated that 22% of LGBT plus folk had left or considered leaving a job due to discrimination. And that talent moving on is really costly to business. We thought that inclusive companies have higher levels of innovation, and finally that they have overall better financial performance. So all in all, a very strong case for marriage equality in Taiwan. I'm delighted that of course, the law passed, and it's such a pleasure to be here today to talk about this report and take all the credit for it.
For queuing it up for you, of course. Well, I mean, it's really powerful stuff, isn't it? If you think about the talent and the business performance, it's a very clear message to Taiwan companies and even multinationals working in Taiwan, who of course hire people from Taiwan. You know that LGBT is it's a truly important topic and something that should be paid attention to. So
Absolutely.
Tony, as you mentioned at the beginning, you know, IBM has been working with this topic for 30 years now. What would you actually consider to be the most important economic element for businesses to consider? I mean, Catherine has gone into a little bit, but can you dive a little bit deeper from IBM's standpoint?
Sure. So first of all, the report on Taiwan is just extraordinary. I just want to congratulate Open for Business on it. So if anyone has not read that report, make sure that you retrieve a copy.
We'll put it on our website.
It's outstanding. It really is. Truly eye-opening. It's wonderful. IBM's long-term commitment to diversity and inclusion has generated a range of economic benefits, very similar to what Catherine has said, I mean, ranging from employee retention, increasing trust with our customers, building an openness, a more transparent way of conducting business with our business partners and our employees, our customers, I should say, all the way to reducing barriers for employees to realize their full potential. And as I mentioned before, I mean, one of the things that we always strive to do is to collaborate with our employees so that they're no longer consumers of HR, but rather they're co-producers, co-creators. And I think that's a really important shift in the way that employees are engaged in implementing HR programs and policies. When you look at the younger generations, and I'm sure many of you are out there in the audience today, you look at the millennial mindset, you look at Generation Z, Generation 2020. I mean, the younger generation, there is a transformational shift in the way that they want to engage with companies, in the way that they want to co-create the environment and the culture from which, you know, they value and they respect, right, and they interact. So this, for us at IBM, we've done that a lot. I mean, when you look at our history and you look at the different types of programs that we've implemented, like JAMS, you know, which is an intranet collaboration experience where we invite all IBMers to come together over a set number of days to talk about a theme. We just recently did this in the spirit what Peter was mentioning of COVID. We had a Think Forward Jam where we invited IBMers from all over the world to basically share their ideas and perspectives on what is a new way of working. What does that mean for us culturally? What does it mean in the way that we generate value for our customers, right? Over 3 days, we received hundreds of thousands of ideas, which then in turn gets translated into some real actionable programs that we can implement within IBM. So the employee voice, the power of the voice, I think is really important to really engage, especially in Asia. And I completely agree with Peter. You can't take a model that's been developed in Canada or in Germany or the US and just apply it everywhere. It has to be localized. It has to respect and appreciate cultural customs, local trends and manners and etiquette in order to be effective and in order to be embraced. And so for us, at IBM, one thing that's really important for us is to engage our employees locally to help us design and customize the way that we actually implement LGBT plus inclusion. One of the things I'm going to say, and I think many of you in the audience, I think Catherine and Peter both know Claudia Brignotti. I know you know David, you know her very well. She's a good friend and colleague of mine. You know, she introduced the concept of the cost of thinking twice. And that's basically when we talk about the economic benefits, we also have to talk about the disadvantages and the losses based on not being able to bring your authentic self to work. And that's something that's quite devastating, you know, when employees don't feel comfortable talking about their partners or putting pictures on their, you know, in their cubicle. That is something that also, I think, in any culture, is something that really does create a barrier for transparency and openness. And so when you talk about the economic benefits, I also want to talk about the economic losses, because that's also the opportunity cost and the losses associated with not creating a culture of inclusion is really devastating. So I'll stop there, but it really is something that's very valuable for us here.
You know, I always write down things I want to quote you from you, Tony, and co-producers of HR is the one that stuck. That's really good. I think having empathy with the LGBT community is so important. And so Peter, I actually want to ask you, from your perspective, dealing with a number of different Asian countries, what are some best practices that we could potentially use in Taiwan that would be of use when it comes to LGBT inclusion in general?
So, firstly, congratulations on getting everyone into a room. I'm looking at that little screen with everybody in the room there and thinking, my goodness, I wish I was there. We're there in Hong Kong, but we're not there yet. So congratulations to everybody who's actually in the room. I'm hugely jealous. I'd love to be standing there looking you in the eye and actually having this conversation. I would say, you know, I mean, from what Taiwan has done compared with the rest of Asia, they're already on a great track. But to amplify a little bit of what Tony said, are you hearing me okay?
Yeah, fine.
Sorry, I've switched providers a couple of times today already. What I would say is this is not an issue that's kind of out there. This is an issue that's here. Because let's face it, LGBT plus employees are not going to come and work for you if it's not very evident that you're LGBT plus friendly and inclusive. And I tell you what, neither are their friends or their family. And so I think that companies are not addressing this. You're not on the radar of new recruits anymore. And so there should be a bit of a panic button ringing in those organizations. And I would include in the local organizations that have a very international workplace like we have in Taiwan or in Hong Kong. If we look across the region, I mean, I've been really fortunate. I've sat on quite a few panels this year judging inclusion awards. I did one for one of the big UK banks. We've done our own LGBT plus inclusion awards, and I just did our D&I 2020 Diversity and Inclusion Awards in India. There are phenomenal things happening across the globe, even in a COVID environment virtually. And so one of the first things companies need to do is look to their laurels and see what they're doing to support their marginalized communities within their workforce more intently and proactively than done in the past. Because I'm not seeing anybody coming into 2020 stopping to fund their people and their affinity groups. And so if you're hearing that within your organization, you're a little bit out of step with the rest of the world. And I say this from a position of knowledge because I've spoken to almost every one of our clients this year to find out what they're going to be spending with us next year, because as a non-profit, we live or die by the work we do with companies. And of course, companies will go up and down that list as they get more and more proficient and they'll engage us for different things. But I would say keep your focus on diversity and inclusion in general, not just on LGBT, because let's face it, we're an intersectional group. There's LGBT folks with disabilities, there's LGBT folks of color. So you've got to do it across the spectrum. And the one thing we learned this year through our employee caregivers research, where we focused on specifically the caregiving of children and elder parents. We didn't look at disability because we figured that's a much bigger piece of substantive work to actually stand alone. But what we discovered was marginalized groups are more challenged through this COVID-19 COVID pandemic than they are within other groups. And so, you know, I've seen my customers' dogs, I've seen their kids, I've seen their husband walking behind them in their underwear. But for LGBT families, you know, they perhaps didn't want to come out. And if they're living together at home, that may have been an unintended consequence of this. So, you know, you need to be looking at that. And if you tell me anybody has not got an element of mental health issues around this year, I'll tell you, if they haven't, I'll say that's bullshit. I think everybody is traveling a little more of a struggle than previous years. We're all a little bit more bruised than we've ever been, and perhaps a little more sort of short temper than we ordinarily would have been. So we just have to be kind to ourselves and our communities. I was talking to one of the big aircraft manufacturers just to highlight my point. And this big aircraft manufacturer, based in the US, has a plant in Seattle, has plants all over the US and all over the world, manufactures new aircraft into China to supply their airline industry. They've laid off tens of thousands of people around the planet. As a company, they're probably at the bleeding edge of the pain that's going on around travel and tourism. Yet, they are still paying their bills and they're still investing in people, because the people they have left within that industry are the ones that are going to build them out of this for tomorrow. So, you know, what I would say, the number one thing companies should do right now is really focus on what they're doing with their employee resource groups. But it's no longer acceptable to have your LGBT folks train the rest of your workforce on what it is to be LGBT. That's your job.
Excellent. You know, it's true. I mean, again, this goes back to what Tony was saying at the beginning about empathy. Things have changed. Things have changed around the world with this pandemic. And I like the fact, Peter, that you pointed out that those organizations who understand that supporting marginalized people, no matter what they are, but specifically LGBTI people, now is the time to do it. Now is the time to continue the support and keep it going. I did want to say that if anybody, we're going to go through to Q&As from the audience in a moment here. So if you do have any questions, please send them now into chat and through the chat function on the screen, and we'll put those questions up. But Catherine, I do have one question here for you about, of course, it's all about Taiwan here now. What's really the best way to leverage on marriage equality and what's happened now? I mean, you touched upon a little bit before, but specifically, what's really your advice for businesses, for government, the government, and also for the community ourselves? You know, what can we do to make sure that the world of work understands how important it is, this change in Taiwan?
That's such a wonderful question, and I certainly don't consider myself qualified to be giving advice. I think that people in Taiwan know already what needs to happen next. But one of the things that I've seen be particularly important in this space is companies that work together, right? To share experience with one another, to share best practice, to just build that community of knowledge. You know, we see that in multiple organizations, including Open for Business, Workplace Pride, Community Business, and many, many others. But that sort of community where you're really getting down to the discussion level of what works in practice is really, really important. And then, you know, if there are companies in Taiwan who've seen this change and are asking themselves the questions like, where do I start? Yeah. Right? How do I make sure that we are truly inclusive and that we have a culture of belonging? And I would say, you know, on a personal level, I've seen it work very effectively when companies start with their allies, right? Because it's a win-win. On the one hand, you engage people who are committed to this movement, who are straight and cisgender. But on the other hand, you give your LGBT plus employees who might not feel ready to be out at work yet, you give them a safe space, you know, and then they can decide whether to do that or not. And then the other thing I would say is training works really well. And that sounds very trite and obvious, but when training is done well, and when it unearths the kind of unconscious bias that we might have, or gives people the ability to ask those difficult questions that they might be embarrassed to ask elsewhere, then it can be great. You know, there's an information gap. Plenty of people who are straight and cisgender will not know what the lives of their LGBT plus colleagues are like. They just won't. So we have an information gap there. And training, as I said, when it's done well, can be brilliant. And then I'd also reiterate, you know, what Tony and Peter said around employee resource groups, making sure that they're fully resourced, they have clear leadership. That can really help take the company in the right direction.
Wonderful advice, actually. So I think we're going to try at least to go to some questions. Do we have some chat questions? We're going to have now Francesca speak with the questions.
First of all, thank you so much for that discussion. It was very interesting and informative. So Benjamin asked, is there any causality of better LGBT plus inclusiveness that can lead to better economic development, or is it a correlation only? A little bit of a tricky question.
That's a bit of a trick. We kind of answered it a little bit before, but I'm going to give it to Tony because he's been doing it for 30 years. Tony, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, that is an excellent question, and it is somewhat complex to answer it because there's ways to measure it, and there's qualitative and quantitative metrics, and that way that you can actually measure the effectiveness of implementing a program, a DNI or LGBT plus inclusion program. Yeah. And one of the things that we've learned, and there's a lot of research on this, Catherine actually touched upon it, that a lot of corporations, a lot of agencies and market research firms have actually released studies developing the business case for LGBT plus inclusion and showing some viable metrics that can be applied. At IBM, as I mentioned before, employee feedback is really important. So employee satisfaction, very, very important. I want to kind of bridge this to COVID because I think Peter has really emphasized that during the conversation, which, we're living in a very challenging time, and it's really going to transform the way that we actually address our workplaces even more so, right? One of the things that we've learned from COVID is that just being able to continually send out employee pulse surveys to collect data on sentiments, on stress, anxiety, employees' concerns about the way that we're running the business or the way that we're running, the way that we're developing the culture, all that can really help us. Employee sat is really important. It's a very viable metric in helping us to enrich a culture of inclusion, promoting that type of culture. The second thing for us, for D&I, is to develop managed targets to help us understand the demographics of our workforce. We have employees in 98 countries all over the world. We operate in 170 markets. However, it's important for us to have a full understanding in the spirit of clarity to understand what do our diverse constituents, what does our diverse communities look like, our demographics, right? The number of women, the number of LGBT plus employees. We have adopted self-ID. So we're able to actually invite, voluntarily able to invite our employees to share whether or not they're a member of the LGBT plus community. That information helps us to understand where do we need to ensure that we're able to develop and implement professional development programs, education, as Catherine mentioned. So the business case, if I'm always talking to C-suite executives, and they always say, well, what's the business case for it? Well, the business case is the fact that if you're able to develop a culture that really does promote diversity rather than concealing it, and you're able to measure it just based on employee sentiment as well, then you're able to really realize employee retention. You're able to incorporate questions on employee retention, talent attraction. You're able to measure your recruitment efforts and, post onboarding, was that a difference? Was that a decision point for you to decide to join IBM versus another company? So there's different creative ways that you're actually able to develop and implement and measure a set of metrics for this.
And I'm actually going to make a plug for Workplace Pride here. We have a global benchmark as well, which measures the policies and practices of multinationals across borders so that they can find out themselves. And Peter, I'll allow community business to do the same if you like. You have also an index, don't you?
We do indeed. We have an index for Hong Kong. And it's interesting that you bring it up there, because what I realized is actually as we're talking, and Catherine mentioned this with the tours that you go about, the benchmark is changing. And so companies have got a lot to do to get into a space for this. They've got a lot to do to keep up. So in our index this year, as we started talking about it, as I'm sure Workplace Pride did, we've added things, we've changed things. We put the bar a little higher because not because we want to signpost, but because people are expecting more, because they've been giving a little bit, and we're looking for true equality, not just tokenism, but also because the next generation is expecting a lot more too. And so I have someone in my team who's very young, with a couple of other very young folks looking at this, and they are constantly challenging me and saying, Peter, we need to think about this. I just saw this was happening in this country. We need to think about this. And so companies are sometimes not that happy when they see the index next year because there's things in there that they weren't expecting. But we're not expecting them to be able to tick all the boxes. We'll give relatively low marks for that in the first year. It's new, but that'll carry greater and greater weighting as the years go by because we want to see progress. We're not just doing this to measure the status quo. And I think that's the power of the index.
Yeah, well, the landscape is truly changing constantly right in front of our eyes. I'm going to go to Taiwan and see if there's are there any questions there. Jennifer, can you hear us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Are there any questions to any of our panelists from Taiwan?
Yeah. Let's switch a little bit of camera. Hello. We're in Taiwan and physically gathered together. And so I would like to know if anyone or participants have any questions. You can ask questions in Mandarin and we will have our translator to help us.
We'll do our best here.
Wait a second. 等一下，好，再一次。
尽管法律是左边一个东西，我有一个问题想说，我是去年的时候第一次听到关于共融跟友善的程度会对于企业的发展是有正向的影响这件事情。那从那之后，我就一直去分享这件事给我身边的一些企业主或是相关的朋友，让大家知道说，其实就算是从纯粹商业考量的发展，你也都可以去推广更友善的职场环境。但是我发现这件事对于很多我接触到的都是台湾的人，所以对很多人来说是反直觉的，就是他们觉得我要去推动友善，我必须要面对更多挑战，我可能会来自社会有更多更不友善的意见，可能对我的企业发展不好，甚至可能对我的非营利组织发展不好。那这导致了我很不容易去跟他们沟通这件事。我想要知道各位讲者有没有遇过这样子的状况，就是有人他是不认同这一种调查的结果，他不相信这件事情，所以他会提出质疑，例如说，那是因为他们本来就是大企业，所以他才有办法搞这种多元共融友善。我们只是一个中小企业，台湾有非常大量的企业，人数很少嘛，所以我们玩不起这种游戏。那遇到像这样子的质疑的时候，你们可能是怎么样可以去回应它
？Long question. Short translation, please.
I'm a lawyer from Taiwan, so I have this question because I learned last year there is indeed a business case when it comes to LGBT-friendly environment, inclusion, and diversity is very positive for the development of business. So I started, once I learned about the news, I started to share that with my business owner friends. However, for them, this is a very counterintuitive piece of information. For example, they would think that would be very challenging. So for Taiwan, a lot of our businesses are small and medium-sized business. So it will be a lot for them to take on. They will be afraid of step back if they promote this kind of career, workplace friendliness. And that will probably bring something that's not affordable for NGOs to do. So they do not buy it. And they do not really trust that result. And they would say that it's the big business players that have been doing that because they can afford it. For Taiwan, small, medium-sized business to do that environment, LGBT-friendly inclusion and diversity, well, they do not think they can afford it. So do you have any suggestions when it comes to these kind of objections?
Yeah, I also want to add one more thing that our background in Taiwan. So I think most of corporates, they like what this participants say. We have a lot of like a middle size or smaller size, and sometimes it's family companies, and that create our foundation for a really long time for our economic. So right now, D&I policy usually exists in a multinational bigger company Taiwan, but it's really harder for us as an activist to try to change our local companies. So we would like to know if you have any like other countries' experience, or do you have any suggestions for these kind of cultural differences?
This is a dynamic that we know well. So, but I'm going to ask Catherine if you might have some thoughts, Catherine, about this from your experiences.
I mean, I think it's a great question. It's a very valid question, and it's one actually that comes up in lots of different areas, right, with regard to social progress. I mean, the challenge that I would put forward is that it doesn't have to be a massively ambitious, expensive, costly program that's implemented in a company. You can start small. And in fact, it's probably important to start small and do something that's tailored. To give a very concrete example of something that doesn't cost very much, I've heard of companies, you know, when they're doing interviews for new recruits, someone wearing a rainbow pin, for instance, in the interview, and then that influencing the decision of an employee to actually join that company. For how much does it cost to buy a rainbow pin? You know, so we can start small in these areas, but I hear you. I think what you're saying, it can come across as being an overwieldy sort of thing to attack, but I don't think it is. I think there are plenty of small, cost-effective methods that can be used at the very beginning. That's what I would say.
Absolutely. Tony, you'll remember when we were in Singapore, the whole discussion about the rainbow lanyards as well.
Absolutely.
And that is a very inexpensive thing. And I think one important thing to remember is also that, organizations can, as Catherine was saying, do quite a bit with very little. And also, you don't have to have a gigantic D&I program. You can be very small things, but those very symbolic things can change people's minds. It's a clear signal that, this is a safe place to be out. And allies see that as well as LGBTI people. Let's go for one more question in Taiwan and maybe one more chat before we go to the next element. One more question, Taiwan, short.
Do we have any more questions? Okay, please. You speak in English or?
English.
Okay, please. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Edison. I am an NGO worker, and as a consumer and also an NGO worker, and also a human rights activist, so to speak. I'm curious, how can we encourage corporates or business, local business to implement this D&I policies more? Like, what are the measures that we can take to encourage those businesses? Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we'll give that one. Well, let me go to Tony first, Peter, and then we'll go to you, Tony.
Sure. So one of the things I'm most proud of about our program at IBM is the relationships that we have established with a wide range of NGO and nonprofit community organizations around the world. I'm a firm believer that it should go beyond an event-based model and focus much more on establishing a relationship, a partnership that really sets long-term goals. I'm going to promote a very successful initiative that we launched early last year with Open for Business. And Catherine, as you probably know this with Drew, an example of this co-creation is the work that we launched last year with Open for Business's corporate coalition of companies. There are 27 companies. IBM is a member of that coalition. And we launched actually what we call a local influencer program. It's one of Open for Business's, innovative programs in order to promote the economic, the social, the business benefits of LGBT plus inclusion. We've done it in Japan, we've done it in the Philippines, we did it in South Korea, where IBM and all of these different corporations, we formed a coalition. We made a commitment to support the creation of a local influencer program. So we're meeting on a regular basis. Because of COVID, it's slowed down somewhat, but we're still in touch. And the long-term goal of that is for all of us to share best practices, what Catherine had said, and then also long-term to really help influence climate and to really provide recommendations on how to localize those recommendations in Taiwan, in countries like Taiwan. So that's, I think, something that could be very exciting for us. It's the perfect time to do it, to really consider it. And I do think that serves as an effective influencer for governments as well, because they see the corporate sector coming together. They see that they are all mutually, all collectively committed to creating change, advancing LGBT plus inclusion. And so governments then see, there's significant value here if our private sector feels like there is tremendous value in looking at this further. So, it's a very complex ecosystem, very, very insular as well between private, public, and society. So I think that's another recommendation for Taiwan.
Yeah, and it's constantly changing. It's evolving as we speak. So Peter, did you want to say a word about that?
Do you want to get another question in and then I'll try and wrap it up together?
Let's do that, yeah. Any more questions from the chat?
James asked, what are the biggest challenges and barriers for businesses developing and progressing their D&I and LGBT plus actions and policies? And what are the best practices for coworkers who want to create a safe and accepting LGBT plus environment?
Okay. So three very quick things. From the previous panel, when Moriaki-san was talking about successful prides that companies have their ERG groups go to, it really made me remember I worked at the UK Bank in Asia for 23 years. Of all the tons of prides that I joined in my life with corporates, the one that made a difference to me is the one where the senior leadership team showed up. And that's the one I remember. So, if you're going to be an ally, you need to show up and you need to bring your leadership team with you. For SMEs, I would say, is SMEs have clients. If the SME was to look at their biggest client in their portfolio and recognize that anything between 7 to 8% of that employee base is LGBT plus, and then you add to that the friends that work there, you need to be inclusive because your client's going to be looking at you to be inclusive. And we're a massive LGBT population with our friends. We have significant buying power too. So, it's the way the world is going, and they need to be traveling with it. Because I worked at an SME when I was a kid. We had a small family business, and we were significant buyers of products and distributors of products, and this mattered to us. So there was that. I think the biggest challenges for companies is not talking, but not talking to your people. I'm really proud of the fact when I started my first ERG group in Asia, my one goal was to hand that over to somebody that was more local than I was, and perhaps looked a little bit different than I did to run that. And no doubt he's gone on to do far more things than I've been able to do because of his local connectivity and the power of his local network. And so look for the local folks there that have a voice, empower those that don't have a voice to find a way of communicating with you, because quite often it's the quiet people in the room that actually have the most to say. Be very Asian about it. Do not do this in a public forum. Do it one-on-one. Do it outside of the meeting. And questions and things before the meeting and position yourself well. But the biggest challenge is not doing anything. Yeah. You will get some of this wrong. You will make some mistakes, but there's enough folks around the world like Tony and Catherine and the lovely people of Workplace Pride and ourselves that can help you on this journey. We'll be happy to. And you can learn from other advanced issues. I'm constantly on the phone and talking to Fiona North Women's Foundation in Hong Kong about how do we work with intersectionality. I work with disability charities here. I would just say you start small, and you're right. Wearing a pin, that's a brilliant idea. But then include your communities. Like reach out to your clients. If you're in an SME and you don't know anybody that's LGBT or you don't know where to ask, then reach outside of your communities. Go to your banks. So if you're an SME and you're banking with one of the big banks, they have an immense amount of resources and knowledge on this. They can help you.
Yeah, there's so many possibilities, so many things to do. And as you say, Peter, the biggest challenge is not doing anything. So it's time. And there are plenty of people on this call, plenty of people in Taiwan as well with Hotline and Marriage Equality who can help out with this as well. All right, well, listen, I want to thank, we've run over a little bit, but it was a fascinating conversation. I want to thank all of our panelists, Peter in Hong Kong, Catherine in London, and Tony in France. I believe you're in France right now, Tony. So thank you very much for the panel, and Jennifer as well. Everyone in Taiwan. But don't go anywhere.
Here, go around. Yeah, let's say hello.
Thanks so much for the panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So now we're going to go to the next bit. So this is from our host, ASML, or co-host, along with EY.
Hello, my name is Peter Barriere. I'm the global head of HR at ASML, one of the fastest growing semiconductor companies in the world, and I feel extremely proud and privileged to be invited to this really important event. I would like to talk to you a little bit about the importance of diversity and inclusion in general and LGBT in particular for our company, both globally and then in Taiwan. But before I want to do so, I also want to tell you that it's also important for me myself, based on a couple of recent experiences. I mean, before I joined ASML, I worked for another company, and I had an Asian person working for me for about 9 years. We traveled a lot, we worked well together. He told me everything about himself, but I knew he was gay, and I knew he knew it from me, but he never got the courage, and I never was able to make him opening up to me. So I hope this will change in the future. If you then go to what's diversity, what's inclusion for us, you know, diversity, it's a fact. It's there. It's a full range of difference and similarities. It's visible, but also the non-visible differences, but makes each of us unique masterpieces in the university. It's a fact. But inclusion is more than it. It's a behavior. It's recognizing, valuing, and fully leveraging the different perspectives and backgrounds to drive results. Diversity is a mix, it's there. The true value and the true goal is utilizing the mix, utilizing all the diversity we have in our company and society to make our company and to make the world a better place. And sometimes when you talk about diversity, people tend to focus very much on the visible parts of diversity, gender, race, etc. But diversity is much more than this. It's much deeper and much broader. It's also about religion. It's about sexual orientation. It's also about physical abilities and disabilities. But it's also about things like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, etc., personalities. I can also tell you, for example, at ASML, you have a large group of people that have autism, and they're really doing very well. They also group themselves, and we try to sponsor and to engage them in our company. Why is it important? I think you know this, and I mean, diversity and inclusion, it does help you to improve your company performance if managed well. I mean, badly managed diversity is not good. It's not helping us. But it helps innovation, it helps flexibility, and it helps creativity. And that's really critical for a company like us. It really helps us to attract and retain people. And it's really our corporate responsibility. We feel also as a company that our investors expect from us, our employees expect it from us, corporate governance and legislation expect it from us, and the society and, as I said, the employees are really expecting us to show face, especially, for example, now in the US with all the things that is ongoing in terms of Black Lives Matter. And more particularly in ASML, we are a very value-driven company. We have 3 core values that guide us and support us what we do. Challenging, collaborate, and care. And diversity is an intrinsic part of all 3 of them. We really need to have different views and perspectives for challenging each other. I mean, if you put 10 Dutch engineers together and to look at the problem, they will quickly come to the same solution, but they will not take it to the level that we want it to take. I mean, ASML is all about making the impossible possible. In order to do that, we need much more diversity, with much more creativity, and for that aspect, we need diversity. As I said, it's also key to attract and retain talent, especially in a tight marketplace. I mean, we have grown from 15 to 26,000 employees. We really need unique and top-skilled people, and for us, it's a key part. Diversity is a key part of this. And I just experienced it last year. I was speaking to the day that we have come out of the closet day, and I saw somebody from HR sitting there. And I didn't know she was lesbian, I mean, but she came out to me and said afterwards, you know, Peter, that the reason that I joined HR and I joined ASML and I came to Holland is because I knew what you were standing for. And she's really doing great, and she's a top talent. So it's real. And then also people feel much more engaged in an inclusive workplace. We are a Dutch company, and as you may know or not know, Holland was actually the first country in Europe, I think even in the world, that recognized same-sex marriages. And you can see also from this slide that it was really supported by a broad majority, both in Parliament and in the society. Based on this, we also within ASML developed an LGBT chapter. I mean, it's established already in 2014. It's global. It tells us our philosophy, our policies and practices, and it's continuously endorsed by our CEO and also by the entire management. Linked to this, we have a group which is called PINK at ASML, which really continues to raise awareness, to organize a lot of activities, to educate ourselves, and to help the whole area of LGBT plus forward in our company. We believe strongly in symbols and really showing it visible, because I think leadership is not only what you do and what you say, but it's also what you do. So you need to make it visible, your support. As a result of this, we see the LGBT flags waving several times per year. We also have a coming out day, which is organized also by Pink at ASML, where a lot of people from management and also people lower in the organization talk and educate ourselves, and continues to stimulate people to come out during that age or later on. We also want to show visibly that we as a leadership team do support it. And one of the ways to do it is to participate in the Amsterdam Pride. It's intended by either the Board of Management or Executive Committee. And on the left side, you see, for example, Martin van der Brink. And he's really one of our co-presidents in the company and really one of the figureheads of ASML. We also organized the coming out date at the ASML headquarters, and we really want to do it in the central atrium that everyone can see it. And it sends a very clear signal, not only to the people that are gay or lesbian, but also to management and the other employees. It's okay to be different. There's a place for you in this company. And one thing that I also experienced myself, I mean, we also had a pedestrian crossing on campus in the rainbow colors. And the people below, you see, it's myself, it's Peter Wenning, the president, and it's our head of manufacturing together with somebody from Pink at ASML. And I can tell you the feedback we got after this, there's more than every statement. People felt so proud that they work for a company that stood for something, and not only the people that are gay or lesbian, but also all our employees really responded extremely positive for it, and it really helped us to drive engagement and further help to drive inclusion and diversity in our company. If we then talk about Taiwan, I mean, for us, Taiwan is a bit the Holland of Asia. We see it as a figurehead, as in the forefront of diversity inclusion in Asia. We know that, and you think you know this better than I do, that it's really, your country is really a trailblazer for equal rights and opportunity, and you see all these acts proving this, including the 2019 same-sex marriage. In that perspective, we do see Taiwan in ASML as one of our figureheads in terms of driving further diversity and inclusion in our company in Asia. We also lead when it comes to other aspects of emancipation, also in gender. And when we look, for example, in the workplace equality survey in Taiwan, we do see that there is a significant increase of people that do report that there are LGBTQ employees in our company. But we're, like in Europe, we are not yet there. I mean, we do know that coming out is still a problem. And it's still, for example, even in Europe. I mean, I have a cousin that recently came out, and he's Belgium, and it took him also 5 years. So don't believe that even in Europe we are there. But the percentage of people, of individuals that come out are a bit lower than in for example, Holland. 1 of 10 have never come out, and more than half of the respondents have come out to some co-workers, but less than 30% of respondents have come out to the direct supervisor or individuals with a higher rank. So gradually, we hope we can change this. If we then look upon our inclusive survey, I mean, we don't ask our employees, what do you think about inclusion? We look at the drivers of inclusion, what really makes people to step up, to speak up, and to come out in this. It's all about trust, respect, and these kind of issues. And both globally, but also in Taiwan, we score pretty well, and we do feel we have a culture that stimulates our employees when it comes to coming out and to be different. Some other facts, you can also see that actually in some areas, Taiwan actually scores better than ASML globally on gender. We do promote equal job opportunities. The percentage of women hired is moved to 21 in 2018 to 23 in 2019, still too low, but we also see an increase in women in managerial positions. We do everything possible to make sure that our women get equal opportunities, and compared to other domestic and foreign companies in Taiwan, we are more diverse in terms of nationalities. We actually have 27 different nationalities in Taiwan and 118 globally, and in Holland alone we have 100. And in ASML Taiwan, we have quite, like in the whole company, we have quite a young, energetic population. We also are recognized as a very good employer, also linked to our inclusion and diversity strategy, but we do realize we're not there yet. We do continue to have activities, some recent activities that I can tell you. We have the Voice of the Women in CS, that's customer service throughout workshops. We do ethic and diversity sessions in our new hire onboarding process. We have culture mixes, but we do realize more needs to be done. And we have developed a roadmap for this, but includes, for example, also conscious, unconscious bias training, the establishment of a diversity council, etc. So we are on the right track, but we do realize we are not yet there. I will continue to do everything as possible to be an even more inclusive and diverse company. And to finalize, that it's not only coming from me and from the executive management, that it's really also supported locally by our local management. I just want you to read the words of marketing, who was our general manager of ASML Taiwan and Southeast Asia, who really recognized how proud he is, and we are all on our culturally diverse nationalities, and that we do make continuous efforts to recruit, retain women, that we are committed to do more initiatives to support everyone regarding gender, religion, race, nationality, and sexual orientation, and that we think this is absolutely critical to release the full potential of our employees, of our individuals, and ASML. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Peter, for that. It was very enlightening. I liked very much what he said, that Taiwan is the Holland of Asia. Very interesting point. But also the fact that LGBTI inclusion is still a work in progress, because it certainly is in this country, and it's just now starting on its journey in Taiwan as well. And on that note, I'd like to hand over to Jennifer in Taiwan for the next section of the program.
Yes, our next distinguished keynote speaker is our Ambassador at Large, Dr. Jing Li. We met for a few years ago, and we participated in CSW conferences at the UN representing Taiwan in New York together several times. And later, she became the legislator at large of DPP and has been an important ally for same-sex marriage and gender equity education. We both experienced a lot in the past few years, and she never held back whenever facing challenges. Now she is representing Taiwan as the ambassador at large, and let's give her a big hand for her speech. Thank you. It's my honor today to be here, and I'm so happy that I could be still as a member as my new mission by MOFA after I leaving the work in legislative UN for 9 months. So today we have some, I will share some my viewpoint in these issues, and very, very happy that today we discuss about the new our next step and further step in Taiwan, especially in the rights, human rights, LGBTI rights. Today I will focus on diversity and equality. I think former speakers have the same stations with me. So I think that is all our value, the same. The human rights actually is trying to build the diversity and the equality. Please next. Of course, we know last year we finally get a law passed, and or here so many members, our partners know how difficult in past years as a political party members or as lawmakers, we already know how difficult to communicate with our society, with opposite viewpoint groups, or how to difficult to dealing with the law could be passed to make sure we could make every couple could be covered with equal rights in this country. And of course, only now, just maybe one day or couple days strong after this law passed, right?
Yeah.
And after that, after a couple days, and after that, we will initiate our new mission. All we know the human rights, the gay rights, the LGBTI rights is a persistent the fightings to try to give the equality become more easier, become more equally, make every populations, different organizations, different people they could have. So, but even that we still facing so many difficulties, I think something is changing. Please, next one. Last night in my Facebook, I saw so many friends. They post these pictures. These pictures come from our army of Taiwan, and there are maybe over 50 pictures, the wedding pictures from different couples. They are army of Taiwan, and they are ceremony for the mass wedding. And they are two very beautiful pictures next. These are very beautiful two same-sex couples. And the pictures show on the official Facebook of the Army of Taiwan. I think it really means something that even such difficult we are facing more, we are still facing many challenges, and we are facing more and more our missions. We are still changing our government, we are changing our society, are changing our people. So that pictures, I think, is a meaning that we are changing, and the changing world is a good beginning where more and more in the future it will become the very common things in this country. I always say that we urge for gender equality, the women's rights, the same-sex marriage, or the LGBTI. All we want is make everything become normal things, common things in this country and in this world. Please, next one. So I think in past years, many of our partners, especially in same-sex marriage rights, all we want is try to have the freedom of choice. Maybe you do not want marriage, you do not want some jobs, but all we want, I think, in this country, we need to guarantee everyone could have the freedom to have the choice. So, for example, in these few pictures, we have the young female politicians in elections. They should have the very equal right to have the mission, have the chance to get her positions in political fields. We have the migrant women, especially migrants from Taiwan, through their marriage from the South and East Asia women. They will be invited to the headquarters of our political party to share their experience, and we have a very important statement is in the future they and their children will become very, very important person in Taiwan. Were not only the migrant women, they are the future in the countries. And the upper the pictures actually is the female physicians. Last year we invite maybe about 200 female physicians to our president office to celebrate our physician doctor's days, because it's much more difficult for Taiwan to understand, there are some women, they try to balance their professional jobs and their families' cares and their families or their dream or their future. At the same time, they care about politics, care about policies of Taiwan. So I think all we want to do is try to build the diversity and equality in Taiwan. So next. So today I'm so happy and so appreciate all our partners and membership to discuss with create a new issues about how we could to build more friendly and more diversity the cultural and employee environment for LGBTI
friends. So I think we need to do is a new culture to build environment and construct the diversity of role models. I tried to introduce some our example before. We try to have build the friendly and gender-friendly environment in hospital in Taiwan. Try to build more different, actually they based on which one they have their special needs. But I had to say the special needs, actually that it should be everyone, they have their individual need, and a friendly environment or in friendly country, we need to serve everyone, could be more and more freedom and comfortable in the environment. So I think our new mission is first I hope we could sharing positive models. Today we have some partners, they share their experience to us, but in Taiwan I still think we need to push more, try to build the environment and to share the positive models in different working places or different employee, different companies. Just like Jennifer mentioned, in Taiwan we have over 85% companies are small or medium-sized companies. But in traditional Taiwan, this kind of small or medium-sized companies, actually, the employee and their the company's order, the managers, actually they have usually they could have a friendship just like families. Actually, for them, the company is their families, is their home. So if we treat all our ME as our friend, our families, actually, if they have needs, they want to more friendly environment, it shouldn't be a limitation or difficult jobs. But I think in Taiwan, we could try to create positive models from government, from private companies, or organizations. And of course, in past maybe 15 years since Taiwan, we host our gender mainstream policies since our exclusive yuan. We try to sensitize all our members or ourselves in Taiwan. And I think today we talk about the issues. Also, we need to sensitize our employee and or the workers or the companies. And communicate, or we talk about dialogue, is most important. And the dialogue or communicate should to put in government different departments. For example, we have the gender equality department, but also we have a different office in all the gender equality office in different departments of the government. They need to have communication to each other, and the government and our private, our non-profit organizations, and people-to-people, organizations with organizations and companies. I think all there we need to initiate very important job in the futures. And I want to share one our experience in my hospital. We had ever have a student, medical student. Actually, he is a transgender friends, and because all the medical student training, we need go to we need have the course into operation room, and all the hospital have the operation room, dress changing room, have a female dress changing room, male dress the dress changing room, and the student. I think the first step is we need to have a very friendly environment for this. Is friends tell us that you didn't serve my need. So we have the environment, so the student tell us that he need a special room for him to changing his dressing because he's just under his treatment, the transgender. We know that when he mentioned us that we have a very short conference for him, then we build a middle changing room for, I don't want to say for him, for everyone in the hospital, if they need to go to operation room to changing their dress, but they do not want to only belong to male dressing room or female dressing room. And that things in our hospital just a very teeny and peaceful issues, and we discuss with him, and very easy to make everything this normal training programs, normal training the shift. But I think what I want to say is, in the future, we need to, just like we talk about the gender mainstream policies since 1995 in UN, and since that in Taiwan, all we want to do is to increase and build the participations, different background, different gender, different need, or different life experience. Is the gender mainstream policies. I think today we discuss about the diversity and equality is the same. So first we need to we are together to do is to break the stereotype. In Taiwan, until now, some women they are still facing and suffer from the traditional stereotype. Then you have the male children, they need to obey the mother-in-law. We have some social issue in Taiwan recently. So to break stereotype is our missions not only for LGBT, but also any man and woman and any different genders. And to set up the policy is really a mission of government. And to set up the policy, actually, just like gender mainstream policies, the government or organizations really need to increase the participations of all different background, genders, or their ideologies. And third, I think the most important, we experience the same-sex marriage bills, or we know that most important is dialogue, is communications. So to initiate that, to try to make the positive role models be seen, be discussed, and become the dialogue method, I think is our missions in the future. And I think just like many our other speakers and the keynotes they talk about, we could build the more wonderful jobs and works. It's not only for LGBT groups, actually it's for everyone, because everyone could serve the country, the populations all globally, to make everything become more comfortable for everyone, have a more diversity and the freedom to choose what kind of life and what kind of job and our environments. I think this weekend we will have the LGBT Pride in Taiwan. It's so happy that even during the pandemic now, we still could join here and we could have the Pride in this weekend. And so maybe next year we could to have another topic about the LGBT-friendly companies, LGBT-friendly the department of government, and they could become another issues in next LGBT Pride next year. I think all our trying to do is to create and to be the partner of the globally human rights partners. And in Taiwan, when we have some fighting with government or politics, we were linked to that together. In Taiwan, the social workers or the social activities, we were linked together because linked together will make become more stronger, more powerful, and more difficult to be destroyed. I think in the human rights roles, all we need to link together. So thank you today's the conference, and I think we really link tight and make us become more stronger and make all the global human rights issues become a normal life, just like wear your mask during pandemic. Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to invite Dr. Lee to say a little bit, and please, if there is any questions online or from our physical participants, feel free to raise your hands, and also if you want to ask questions in Mandarin, that will be translated by our translators. Any questions or online question? David?
Taiwan first.
OK 有问题吗？有没有什么问题？好，这边有麦克风，谢谢。Microphone, please. 要这个。一开头的时候，我们听到关于工作时数或者是工作的时段制度，那就跟我们这个认同或是团体 LGBT 等等等这样子的一个10%到30%之间的族群数有没有什么关联？跟我们自己下自己的定义的时候有没有什么关联？ Okay, so wait a second. Let's collect a few questions and then we can answer together because of the time. So, do you want to do the translation? Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So,
it's fine.
Yeah. We can invite the professional. Thank you.
So in the beginning, we heard you talk about the kind of works people do, the hours that they work for, or the different systems that they work under. I'm just wondering what does that have to do, or how does that influence the identity of us as LGBTIQ? And when you talked about the 10 or 30% of LGBTIQ population in companies, what kind of relationship does that have with identities as LGBTIQ?
Okay, so we are going to collect a few different questions. Okay, please. 这边。
Hello， 我有一个问题是关于企业相关的，因为其实去年那个同婚通过之后，大家觉得是个非常大的胜利，所以我们开始去做一些工作平台企业的一些出柜跟讨论。可是就跟今天我们玉兔的那个分享一样，其实在台湾的一些中小企业，尤其是台湾整个社会的氛围其实相对保守的。我们都知道沟通的时候其实是遇到非常非常大的挑战。那如果可以给一些建议，可能我们从哪一些方面开始做起，会相对轻松一些，相对可能性高一点点的话，我相信会对大家非常的有帮助。
So my question is actually regarding the companies and communications with them, because since we passed same-sex marriage last year, it was a great victory for us, and we began hosting seminars and events on how to come out in workplaces and things like that. But then we realized, just as mentioned earlier on, the companies in Taiwan are mostly small and medium enterprises, and that builds up to the society being conservative overall. So it has become very challenging in terms of communicating with these companies and the society. So are there any suggestions as to how we can better communicate with them, or are there any way for us to talk to them that can make it probably easier for them to understand what we're trying to say, or easier to get through to them?
Okay, so that's our second question. David, do you have any online question for one?
I don't think so at this point, so I'll give you the floor, please.
Okay, so I really want to collect one more question from our participants right now. Do we have any? Okay, so please. Come here. I think I want to try to mix two questions, because the first is actually the LGBTI identity or in their job is really means anything. I think it still have something related. First, in Taiwan, all we know most of the women's needs. Sometimes they need to have the home care of family care issues. Their children, her children sick, she need to take her the children to hospital, or the parents, the elderly, their families. But if this kind, actually our government they have the right, the employees, they have the right to have the request that today I have some maybe home the family care issues or the children care issues. So if the environment is difficult, I think today not only LGBT, but also if the environment is difficult for the woman and they to ask for today I need to have some time to do my private jobs, or even the men employee. It will relate something. So LGBT, for example, for the companies, if the owners, they understand their employee actually, they have marriage, so the gay partners, his mother or his mother-in-law have something they need to do, they need to take him to hospitals. I think all these things were related about how they could to make sure their marriage or their identity could to make sure they have the rights in their jobs. So of course, I do not think everyone need to raise their hands to say, hey, I'm a sexual, the heterosexuality is females, or I'm a gay. I do not think that that shouldn't be the target. But the target is if I have the need to ask for some rights, the government guarantee me, and during the times I have this special or some the LGBT the rules in this environment, if that is friendly and more easily to speak out. So at the same time, we mentioned about the companies. This is why I say the positive model is important, because of course I understand, especially in the small or medium-sized company in Taiwan, sometimes maybe they have only 5 staff. So it's very difficult to how to say that, to come out or to talk to our college about, hey, I'm special with, I'm different with them. It's difficult, and actually we do not think that shouldn't to ask them to do that. But go back to the companies. When we talk to them about this issue, the LGBTI's right, the word inclusive, the all related issues, actually the owners of them, most of them, they do not understand what happened and what I need to prepare. And especially in Taiwan, we talk about the employment rights. They need, maybe for them, they were aware about. So they were asking for more holidays, or I need to prepare more fee for the jobs. They were aware and they were anxiety about that. But if we have positive roles or positive example for them, when we discuss about that we will let them know, hey, have several similar company with just like your companies, similar size, similar style companies, and they have this kind of example, and it's easy and not painful for them. It's easy, and just maybe you shift something, or you build a more convenient the items for your employee. I think they will become more accept for these issues. That I think for many of Taiwanese, just like we talk about same-sex marriage, of course we understand have some organizations, they are such unfriendly, but most of the populations, most of the companies, actually they just do not know what happens in the work trade. So only they need to understand is what will change my life. What if I do something, what will change in my job? Or your request, what will change if I obey your request? So the models, maybe we need have some time to communicate with some companies, especially small size companies, and try to install their experience to another similar companies. Then I think they were not so anxiety about that, and they were very easier to understand. Oh, that easy for my companies because I have what kind of facility or equipment. I think maybe example is important for them. Yeah, I agree with that. Especially Jing was at the very front line to start the communication and conversation with especially supporters from DPP during the marriage equality campaign. So I think she has a lot of experience to exchange experience and her ideas with ordinary people in Taiwan, and talking to each other, trying to understand each other, I think is very important in terms of these issues. And we already accomplished one very important milestone, which is we already passed the law. So the company needs to, every company needs to follow the policy right now. So if you get married, you have same-sex spouse, they are not allowed to refuse to give you your like a wedding leave or some allowance or some insurance. They have to do that. But beside that, communication is always needed. So just like smartphones, when we initiate smartphones, all our parents will say, "Hey, what's that?" And don't use too long time to use that. But all Taiwanese know now. Our parents every morning they will send picture to you to say hello to you, and they have many actually they have the channels. They are based on we call them home, right? YouTubers. They know so many YouTubers that we never know. So sometimes we must to say sometimes these kinds of issues for our maybe some different generations. The difficult is not they do not accept new issues. Because in past decades, sometimes for them, the new issues for them actually accompany with something they will feel lonely or so sometimes they will feel I want to use the humiliated, but sometimes they will feel lonely that they maybe be bound by that you are so out of the trade, so out of the new issues. So sometimes they will feel frustrated for the new issues. So if try to build the different things sometimes for them, when they really have the smartphone and you install some app, then we'll find, oh, it's so easy and then it becomes their new life. So I think sometimes not sometimes the generation gap actually based on that they do not know what they could to join, and if they know, I think they were more skillful to use that and more skillful and more proud to talk everyone, hey, I know new issues, I know the new trade, and I know how to communicate, how to build the environment for my employees. I think that is possible. Thank you. So, Leonard, do we have any more questions?
No questions from this side, but just from our side, I would like to thank also Ambassador Lin for her very profound words, particularly about doing the right thing. This is about doing the right thing, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you. Let's give Ambassador Lin a big hand. Thanks for you. So right now we are about to our closing time. So Michael or David, do you want to give some closing remarks for our conference today?
I'll start off and then we'll go to Michael.
Okay, please.
I'll start off. Well, again, I'd like to thank everybody who has played a role in this. Of course, our host, EY and ASML, for playing such a supportive role. Our partners, Taiwan Hotline Association and Taiwan Equality Campaign. This story's actually been going on for at least a year and a half. In reality, longer, because we met the Hotline Association, I think 2 years ago when they came here to Amsterdam. And so these discussions have been going on. It was delayed because of pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. But it's been a wonderful experience, I think, for all of us as we've been along the journey of how you include LGBTI in the workplace. It's been, enlightening, I think, for all of us. I did want to make one final comment before I hand it over to Michael. And we've heard a number of times, particularly in Taiwan, the topic of small and medium-sized enterprises, how challenging it is. Actually, in Europe, small and medium-sized enterprises are also the backbone of the economy here. So we know this dynamic. So what I would like to do as I close is to challenge Taiwan multinationals in Taiwan, and also large Taiwanese companies who have more resources, who are maybe a little bit further along with diversity and inclusion, to engage with SMEs, because it's also, they are your clients, and the LGBTI community is there to help. civil society organizations such as the Hotline and Taiwan Equality Campaign are there to help, as is Workplace Pride. So from our side, thank you very much. And I'll hand over to Workplace Pride co-chair, Michael Colmont, to close down the conference.
Yes, thank you, David. So it is my pleasure to have the final word here. And a big thank you also, I would say, to the participants here. We started, of course, here in the morning. We had really a packed program, really intense. And what I hope, and this will be my final sentence, that this conference brought all the stakeholders together and set the tone for workplace diversity and inclusion in Asia for years to come. Thank you very much for participating.
Thank you, and please remember we do have a reception later, and the prize is Saturday. So thank you for your time and enjoy the night and drinks. Thank you so much. Thank you, Amsterdam.
Bye. Bye. Bye.